Thank you all for being here. Hello, hello. I am really grateful that you're all spending time with us today. I feel very passionate about this work. You know, every single day I talk to people who are struggling with speaking anxiety, but they're only struggling sometimes. And they feel so I work with really brilliant people. People who have deep subject matter expertise, people who know often so much more than their senior stakeholders. I work with people who have full confidence with their teams. And yet, when people are in front of senior leaders, or the pressure is on, or they feel like there's something to prove, people shut down. And so, if that is you, I am so glad that you're here. What I want to present today is quite counterintuitive. Most of the people I speak to every day are over preparing, are scripting, are trying to learn more, working harder to be better communicators. And from everything that I've explored over the last decade plus of doing this work, a lot of that can actually perpetuate the anxiety. And so I'm really here to share some simple tools that I've been working with clients for over 12 years at this point on. And I do these free workshops once or twice a year. It's really important for me to share this work, for you all to know that over preparation perpetuates a lot of the speaking anxiety that we're here to explore today. And I want to talk about why overworking doesn't work and how we can actually disrupt the cycle. And that's what we're going to do today. Share some tools so that you can stop blaming yourself. I'm so glad that you're here. So while you're coming in, I want you to chat. I want to know and drop this in the chat. What have you tried to make it better? And, for me, I had a really big history of speaking anxiety. I was fully confident leading teams. The moment I had to talk about myself or talk about the work, I would shut down. I would have air hunger and throat constriction and suddenly be unable to articulate or think on my feet. And for me, I tried deep breathing. I tried reading so many books and podcasts. So, what have you tried to fix this? Can you drop it in the chat? Toastmasters, yeah, practice can be so important. I've tried to focus on breathing. Yeah, and if you're like me and you have breath-based anxiety, a lot of focusing on breathing and taking a deep breath can actually make anxiety worse. We're going to talk about that today. Yeah, deep breathing, side notes. Yeah, keep that coming. I want to hear, what have you tried to, quote, fix this, right? So I want to talk about why we're here today, and I am so honored to do this work. I feel in this moment where we're seeing this very alpha dominant top-down leadership fail, and that is, it's always a failure. It's always insecurity. And I know that because I work with a lot of people who present that way. And we all need to trust ourselves more to speak up. At work, in life, we need to be able to trust ourselves more, and particularly for empathetic leaders who know how to lead with compassion and inclusion at the center. We all need you to be trusting yourself more, to stop blaming yourselves for what's happening in these rooms, and to have some tools so that you can really expand your focus. And, I do a lot of work privately. I support private clients. I also support a bunch of startups. And this is really some of my favorite work to do right now is supporting small businesses. And it's really interesting. I can really see in these smaller organizations the difference that comes when leadership knows how to lead with empathy and humanity at the center. And what we're seeing right now, unfortunately, is a lot of leading out of fear. And we can see that when people are leading out of fear, the organization collapses, trust collapses. And look at what's happening all around us with, top-down dominant leadership. It's failing, right? And so we have to hold on to our empathy, our humanity, and that's what we're going to talk about today. And I'm so happy to say that in this hard moment, and I know that this is a really hard moment, many of you are probably looking for jobs. Many of you might be feeling a lot of lost agency in your professional work. And if you're feeling that, I hear you, and I'm really glad that you're here. And I know, my private clients and my private roster is full right now, which I'm so grateful for, but I am so lucky to support empathetic, brilliant people And every one of my private clients is absolutely thriving right now in these really tough environments. My clients are directors at tech companies, they're executive directors at cultural institutions. My clients are managing losing funding, losing their livelihoods. I work with a lot of doctors and scientists, engineers, people who are on the front line of a lot of our crises today. And my clients are getting promoted. They are thriving because they know how to communicate with clarity and confidence, with ease and comfort. And that's a lot of what I want to share today. Because when we can lead with confidence and trust at the center, we thrive even in crisis. And when we lead from urgency or dominance, it usually fails. And so we can see a lot in the chat, right? And please, oh wow, please scroll up because people are sharing a lot of what they've tried and sharing a lot of what they've struggled with. And I want to name the frustration that this particular kind of anxiety has. And so raise your hand and you can raise it visually, or you can even do a little raise in the chat function of Zoom. Raise your hand if you've worked really hard to fix this. Raise your hand if it's getting worse the more you try. And and there's never any forced participation in this space. So if you feel compelled to put your video on, you're welcome to, only because presence is presence and we can feel each other. I don't call on anyone in any of my spaces ever. And so you never have to participate in any way that doesn't feel supported. So I just want to see you or hear from you. Who finds that it's getting worse the harder you try? Who finds that you're getting frustrated the more that you try to work on this? Who finds that it gets worse the higher you elevate in seniority and responsibility? Yeah, yeah. And so today I want to give you tools to break the cycle, to try something new. Because here's the thing, and this I want you all to hear me loud and clear. This is not a communication issue. And I'm going to say that again. This is not a communication issue. When we think we struggle communicating, we work harder to communicate, and that often disrupts our innate communication. So this is a focus issue. And when we are focusing on how we're being perceived, we simply cannot focus on what we know to be true, on our expertise, on the things that you focus on every day when you're with your teams and you're at your most comfortable. And when the stakes go up, our attention splits, we start over prioritizing how we're being perceived. And that split is what's causing the things we're seeing in the chat. And just to demonstrate this, I worked with a chief information officer. He's a head of IT at a very large company a few months ago. And he first came to me right after a board meeting. And he said that he had horrible nerves in the board meeting. And he said it was debilitating. Everyone could see it, he said. And I asked him in our first session, what were you actually focused on in that board meeting? And he said, I have to do a good job. I have to prove my credibility. I think they can tell how nervous I am, or they didn't like what I just said, right? So after 3 months of working together privately, we worked on his preparation. We worked in a way that was holistic, not focusing on the board meeting, actually, focusing on everything else and building a foundation for his presentation style, for him to access his confidence in executive settings. And he actually last week just gave his next quarterly board meeting presentation with no nerves. And so can you all see how it's a focus issue? Does anyone have any questions about it being a focus issue? Okay. And so again, I'm hosting this for free because I've actually spent the last year only doing private coaching. In my history, I've done a lot of group coaching and private coaching. The past year, I've only done private coaching. I'm actually about to launch my next group program this week, which I'm so excited about, and I'll share more later. But in this private coaching time, I've noticed a trend, which is that really smart, brilliant people are working harder and harder to fix something that's actually not a communication problem. And that a lot of these people are actually thinking about leaving their careers that they've spent decades in building because of this issue. And we need more empathetic leaders leading and being heard. And so here's the reframes that we're going to get to today. Instead of focusing on confidence, I want you to think about focusing on comfort. Instead of focusing on perfection, I want us to focus on presence. That's a very different focus. And instead of focusing on communication and being a better public speaker, we need to focus on focus and consolidating our focus. And I'm seeing the chat. Yeah, things change abruptly in interviews and it messes with your focus. So that's kind of what I'm talking about. Like when you are comfortable, you're like, and don't you, this is rhetorical. What are you focusing on when you're comfortable? You're probably focused on what you want to share and your work or the impact on your team or teammates, right? And then when we're in an interview, I know for me, all of a sudden I focus on having to prove myself, on impressing, on how I'm being perceived, on what did they think of what I said, right? And the point of this work is actually to expect that. It's natural. So the biggest part of this work is expecting that interview situations, that executive leadership situations, these moments where we have to prove ourselves, that we have to expect that we're going to have status anxiety, that this is going to come on. I want you to expect it instead of it feeling out of your control. And then I want you to have a plan to put in place when it does happen. And that's how we start to reclaim our confidence, rebuild our trust in ourselves, which is so important. And it's all because I believe that you're confident when you're comfortable. And can I just see a show of hands? Like, who agrees with that? Like, when you're comfortable, you feel confident. Yeah, yeah. And if that's true, then this is not a communication issue. If you feel comfortable communicating in other settings, then the problem is not your voice. The problem is those rooms. And I have to tell you, again, I have private clients at all ends of the spectrum in terms of levels of seniority, in terms of industry, in terms of backgrounds and different ways that they identify. And I have to tell you that most human beings in this moment are struggling to speak up in spontaneous moments when the pressure is on. Even the people who are really good at hiding it. It's really, really important that we remember that. So I'm going to share some tools today. And these are tools that, in my private sessions, I'm building these tools with my clients for my clients. And sometimes we like build tools from scratch. Sometimes I use tools that other clients have used and know are successful. And so I want to share just a few of those tools. And this is how to be in this space today. First of all, it's really, really important that each of you adapt these tools for your own lived experience and your weekly situations. This is about you investing in your intuition, investing in trusting yourself. If you disagree with something I say, good. I really want you to embrace that. I only can understand my own unique perspective. So you have a different lived experience. And please honor your voice and trust yourself. There's something about being here that helps us simulate the intensity in some of our other situations. And I really want to help you flex that muscle and have a taste of what it is to bring these tools into your other weekly meetings. And it's really important that you're working with these tools when you're comfortable. And you might have heard this before that when we're really scared, it's hard for us to actually be present and learn new things. So it's really important that you are pushing yourself to show up. And at the same time, I want you to prioritize your own comfort. It might be your lunch break if you're on Eastern time. It might be early morning if you're somewhere else, or even late at night. And so go to the restroom, take care of yourself. That's what's important in this work, is prioritizing your own comfort. It is the only way that we can access our most consistently confident selves. And I want to encourage you to chat. Is there anything I didn't say that would make this space more comfortable? If so, please drop it in the chat. And this is a space for all of you. And so whatever will help you bring yourself to this space to be more comfortable, I welcome that. Let's get to work. So I'm Lee, and the work I do helps people express themselves with consistent confidence in every room they enter. I started to do this work around 2014, and it really comes from my own personal desperation with status anxiety. And I didn't have those words then. I wish that I did. And status anxiety is when we get anxious only around people with status, who we presume to have more status. We get nervous only in groups. We get nervous when there's pressure or something to prove. And for me, I was so confident doing my work. I was a theater director for over a decade. I could lead teams of over 100. And I had no problem doing my work and speaking to large groups. I could really feel full confidence in that space. But the moment that I was put on the spot in a press interview, the moment I was interviewing, when I had to make small talk and socialize, my personality shut down. I had this throat constriction, this air hunger. It it incapacitated me from being able to be present. And I have spent the last 10 plus years working with thousands of brilliant, empathetic human beings, people at the top of their career who struggle with exactly this. And if you're here, I imagine that you do too. And I want to assure you that this is not a personal failing. This is a problem with our cultures of our workplaces. And so if you've experienced that, you are not alone. One belief runs through everything I do, and it is what I said before: you are confident when you're comfortable. And I think it's important to repeat it because we forget. The leaders I support have full confidence leading their teams, but the moment there's something to prove, they find that their attention splinters. And this can result in, and raise your hand if you experience any of these. Brain fog. Does anyone get brain fog in these situations? Does anyone go blank or find that you lose your train of thought? Yeah. And this is a big one. And I'm hearing this so much right now, which is breathlessness. This feeling like you can't quite get your voice under you. Does anyone experience breathlessness? Yeah. And the biggest thing is that it's unpredictable, right? And so can everyone chat? Like, when does this show up? What rooms? I want to hear, is it on Zoom or is it in person? Is it in small groups or is it only when you're public speaking? Is it particular audiences? Throw it in the chat. I want to hear from you. Is it situation related? Is it information related? What do you notice? In person, yep. When I deal with micromanaging supervisors, I can feel myself shrink. Yup. It's information related. So you might be in a new role. You might feel like, oh, there's new information I don't have. I need to learn more, right? Nope, you need to be present. In person with supervisors, interviews. In person, mostly in front of, do you see all of this in the chat? It's happening when we are in front of senior leaders. It's on the tip of my tongue, but I can't get it out. This is when I'm talking to big groups or those in higher roles. So we are about to get into the tools, and I'm so excited to share these tools with you because they're super simple. And I have to say, people come to me with lifelong speaking anxiety. And once we can really accept this truth that I'm not broken, the rooms are problematic. Once we stop assigning blame on ourselves and living in that shame, everything changes. Once we can start seeing the anxiety in everyone else and how much, oh, they might seem confident, but they're probably hiding it. And I just want you all to know I'm very data driven. And for the past 10 years, most of my clients have been honestly data leaders and people building AI and brilliant engineers. And I've been collecting data. And my data points are in the thousands and thousands. And they're mostly from the people that I support in team workshops, mostly at the director level and above at some of the world's top corporations. And the percentage of people who struggle with this, with unpredictable speaking anxiety, does anyone want to guess in the chat? And again, these are anonymous. This is thousands and thousands of data points at the world's top companies, predominantly from sales folks, from marketing people, from engineers. Does anyone want to guess a percentage? of the percentage of people who struggle with spontaneous speaking anxiety when the pressure is on, it's fluctuating between 92 and 95%. The people who intimidate you are likely intimidated. And I just want to restate, alpha dominance is always insecurity. A lot of my clients are people who present with a lot of confidence. They're struggling and they're really good at hiding it. And so, if that's true, how does that change how you're walking into these rooms? The other thing about these settings that you've all said is when this turns on, these executive settings, is that, and I say this with a lot of love, too many executives are not great communicators. The best leaders communicate with warmth. That's the priority, making people feel safe, making people feel seen. That is leadership. And I know that a lot of you in this space know that. And a lot of executives are unable to be vulnerable or have that open warmth. That means they're struggling. And so that's a problem with those spaces, not with you. Yeah, I believe that. I've worked with a great deal of executives. Yep, it's true. And even if it's not true, let's pretend like it's not true. It still serves your confidence to believe it, right? So I can't wait to get into these tools. Let's get right into this. Because comfort is the key to confidence, when we go into fight or flight and our analytical brain takes over, our vagus nerve shuts down. And the vagus nerve, and raise your hand if you've heard about the vagus nerve, it's been very buzzy around nervous system regulation. The vagus nerve is what's responsible for us feeling comfortable. The vagus nerve it runs from our brain through our chest cavity down to our gut. It connects our gut brain with our brain. And the vagus nerve, again, works in this kind of circle. And when it's flowing and we're comfortable, it's on. And when it's on, our digestion is optimized, our circulation works, our breathing works. We feel more connection and compassion. And here's the biggest thing I really want you to know. When our vagus nerve is working, our cognition, our ability to think on our feet is optimal. When we go into fight or flight, and I know a lot of you know that because you're often in it because I understand this experience. When we go into fight or flight, our vagus nerve turns off. And so our cognition, our ability to think on our feet shuts down. Our breathing gets dysregulated. That's why we might blush or our circulation becomes dysregulated. We might struggle with breathing. We might have to run to the bathroom. And also our self-criticism turns up. And that's why we can't think our way out of this work. This is very illuminating. I never realized it was a focus control versus lacking technical communication skills, but it makes perfect sense. Yeah. So we can't think our way out of this anxiety. And raise your hand if you've tried thinking your way out. For me, I was like stuck in this thought cycle. I was like, okay, this is going to fix it. This is going to fix it. I'm going to try that. I'm going to try that. I'm going to control my thinking, right? All of that was actually perpetuating the problem. We can't think our way out of it. And the reason we can't think our way out of it, the reason why we have to start with physical tools is because the way that the vagus nerve works is that 80% of the fibers are going from the body to the brain. That means that we can only impact our nervous system by making physical changes, by focusing on physicality. We cannot think our way to calm. And also, this entire process is habitual, and that habitual process actually kickstarts the cycle. So we need to use tools that are not habitual. We need the tool to force us to be present. We want the tool to actually take the part of your brain that's racing ahead, that's overthinking, that's focusing on how you're being perceived. We want to give that part of your brain a job. And just by choosing that one tool, it disrupts this cycle. It puts you back in the present moment and in your agency because anxiety takes away our ability to make choices. And with this work, the habits are going to return. But that tool that we have chosen, is what brings us back to the present moment. So we're going to choose tools that are not habitual, and we're going to consolidate our focus instead of splintering it. Okay. And he says, it's funny. When I give presentations, I am nervous. The feedback I get is I looked prepared. And this is something that happens. A lot of my clients say that they think their nerves are more obvious, and I know that they're not. So who here gets formal when they present? Like you find yourself losing your natural warmth and you get kind of formal. Yeah, that is super common in public speaking. And it goes back to remember that warmth. We need to be accessing our natural warmth. It's how we turn our confidence on. Okay, so here's the framework. Okay, I'm so excited to share this. In order to refocus out of the anxiety, we need to choose a new focus. And this is the work that I've spent building for the last year and a half. And I've worked on this. So, I mean, this is the work of the last 10 plus years, but really the last year and a half, I've been hyper focused on this framework. And this is really the first time I'm sharing it publicly beyond my private clients. So I'm so excited about that. And it's called the empathetic presence framework. And there's three ways that you can consolidate your focus, and you have to choose one at a time. This is about singular focus. And you might find that you need a certain focus in certain situations, or you might find that you personally just gravitate towards a certain kind of focus. The three parts of the framework are embody, expert, and empathy. I'm going to put those in the chat. Embody, expert, and empathy. So embody are physical grounding tools. And this is if you have breath-based anxiety, if you have these physical symptoms, we need to get out of your head and into your body, and we need to activate your vagus nerve on purpose. So raise your hand if you think that you're going to start with embody tools. If you have those physical symptoms and you feel like that might be an answer for you. Yeah. The next focus is expert. Expert is how we organize what we want to say. It's frameworks that organize your thinking in a concise and clear way so that your analytical brain has a structure to work with instead of spinning out of control. And so this is the content, the ideas, the structure. Empathy, the third focus, is the nonverbal. It's relational. It's how we redirect our attention towards our audience. And it's how we actually can channel our empathy as a focusing tool instead of a distraction. Who here feels like sometimes your empathy is a liability? You feel like maybe you're too empathetic or you're taking in too much from the room. Yeah. I worked with a scientist a few weeks ago. He's a co-founder of a really cool science startup. But he's also not native English speaker. He's from Korea. And he kept saying that he was taught to really read the room. So he's in all of his executive settings, like going like this and over, look, what's that person thinking? What's that person thinking? But it was completely splintering him. And once he was able to focus on empathy, which was how he wanted to make his audience feel, it elevated his natural authority because he wanted to make them feel safe. He wanted to make them feel heard. And he got away from focusing on himself being perfect. So that's how these three focuses work. And we're going to start with embodied. Like I said, we have to start in the body. And whenever I start with people, whether it's in private coaching or in my new group program, that also starts in embody, because even if you're not aware of these physical sensations, even if there's only like a 2% uptick in your physiological response, that's impacting you. And we want to counterbalance that reaction in order to regain control. It says, what if you don't feel safe in your body? Oh, yes. And this is so, so, so important. So in those cases, we want to start, first of all, when I'm working in a trauma, I always work in a trauma-informed way because we need to be. And there's a lot of trauma that comes out in this work, a lot of lifelong speaking anxiety and real deep fear. I also want to say, I don't really like the word anxiety because I think a lot of our workplaces are actually unsafe for a lot of human beings, particularly in this moment. So that's not anxiety, that's fear, right? And so when you don't feel safe in your body, we can titrate some of these tools. And so instead of doing them for a long time, try it just for 1 or 2 seconds and then come back. 1 or 2 seconds and then come back. But I also want to say that if the physical tools are at all triggering, we want to play with a different focus first. And so today I'm going to share two tools. The first is an embody tool, and the second is an expert tool. And so I want you to play with that embody tool and trust yourself. That being said, I want us to all be listening to our bodies and how we're reacting, and especially in terms of things that might be traumatic. And in my experience, working with thousands of people and particularly working with a lot of people who are very marginalized in our American workplaces, working with people who are in very toxic environments, every time the answer is for you to be more comfortable, for you to be more aligned in yourself, for you to not abandon yourself or get absorbed into the dominance in the room. We're going to start with the simplest tool I have. And I start with this tool every time because it's important that we don't complicate this. I want you to know when you're doing the tool or when you're not. So this is the simplest tool that I have. And, I met with a new client last week. She's a very, very senior executive, an SVP at a global company. And she's been struggling with this anxiety for the last 2 years. You would never know. I think she presents with so much confidence. But we got on our first Zoom together, and the first thing I saw was this. And this kind of, she was like this. And a lot of movement, a lot of leaning forward, and how does, just drop it in the chat. Like once I'm no longer leaning back, I'm no longer kind of rooted right now. Like how does it change how you're perceiving me? How does it change how I show up or what you assume of me? And you can just drop it in the chat. Feel free to say anything. I promise I won't be offended. But how does it change just your ability to listen to what I'm saying? Does it change your ability to listen to what I'm saying? Does it change how you perceive me? It's distracting. Yeah. And so she was doing a lot of this. Oh, yep. I look anxious. You get nervous. Yep, exactly. Because I'm uncomfortable. You're feeling uncomfortable. So most of us are doing this unconsciously. Most of us are leaning in unconsciously. And this, I know it's happening a lot on Zoom, but honestly, I've been doing this work for a long time. And this is something I was seeing way before 2020, which is we can be totally comfortable most of the time. And the moment that we're in that boardroom, the moment we're in an executive Zoom, we lose our center, right? And raise your hand if you think that you might do this unconsciously. You might not even be aware that you're doing it. Who here feels like they might lose in or lose their center? Yeah. So this is not inherently problematic, just like none of our habits are inherently problematic. I don't judge any habits, but leaning in is actually constricting your ability to breathe. Your belly can't expand. So the breath stays shallow and high. And when the breath stays shallow, we can't actually get air into the system. And if you're leaning in and you're telling yourself to take a deep breath, that's becoming hot air that's only going to your head and is actually making the anxiety worse. Because when we're having breathlessness, we don't need more air. We need less air. We need to be exhaling. And that's why this work is so counterintuitive. But leaning in is also habitual, so it feeds anxiety. So can everyone lean in? And even if you're off camera, it doesn't matter. I want you to feel this. Lean in and just like see how it changes your ability to listen to what I'm saying. Lean in. Yeah, feel it. And even like look on the screen and you can see us all leaning in. It's a little bit more intense, right? And this is also just habitual. So it's more likely to feed habitual. And you can also adjust your camera angle. You can pull your camera down a little so that you can lean back more and still take up this good space. Yeah. The point is that you can do anything as long as you do it consciously. But if you're doing it unconsciously, I want you to bring some awareness to that. And so now lean back and purposefully actually put your back against the chair. And now, instead of being habitual, can you actually move your attention while you're listening to me? Can you move your awareness from here and analyzing what I'm saying? Can you actually move your awareness to where your back is hitting the chair? And so the point here is when you're put on the spot, most of us just start speaking right away and we look up and we go into all of this habitual behavior and then we're thinking and speaking at the same time and we're not really sure where we want to go and then we run out of breath. So we need to replace that with something on purpose. So for me, when I'm put on the spot now, instead of doing that process, I lean back, I look down, I anchor my attention. I almost think of like a bubble, like I'm going to keep my attention in my body. And I pause and I breathe and then I respond. And this activates the vagus nerve. And when our vagus nerve is activated, it increases hormonal confidence, which is it increases our access to testosterone, dopamine, serotonin. These hormones are essential for leadership and confidence. And so it's really important that we practice this in comfortable spaces first. And we're going to do that right here. Actually, we're all going to practice it together, and you're all muted, so no one is going to hear anything. It's what that is doing for you. And it's really, really important that you're practicing these tools when you're comfortable. So we're going to do it here, but then later today, I want you to choose one meeting where you wouldn't normally focus on this kind of stuff and practice it there. It's really, really important. I'm going to put you on the spot right now. And I want you all to practice responding. You're going to want to look up, you're going to want to go to habit, and instead disrupt the habit. Maybe you look down, maybe you breathe. I want you to pay attention to what happens in this moment where no one can hear you and you're still being put on the spot. And good question in the chat. How do you do this when standing? For my TEDx talk, this was my primary anchor. I railroaded my feet so my feet were parallel. And then I put one of my feet behind and I leaned back into my back foot. And it kind of created my own space. And then whenever I started leaning in again, I reset to that physical anchor. I love these questions. Keep them coming. Okay. And the question I'm going to ask you is, how do you think you are perceived in your most challenging moments at work? In my most challenging moments at work, I fear that I'm perceived as overly warm, as not serious enough, and this is all my own perception, which I am aware of. Did everyone get to practice? I'm keeping you concise on purpose. Calm, more confident. I want to say that it's not habitual. And so often it will feel a bit unnatural. My hope is that it reminds you of what you actually can access when you are comfortable. Said I am able to focus more on my thought around what I wanted to say, grounded. Said I noticed when I went to my go-to thinking pose of looking up, it helped me go back to center. Yeah. So, and that's one of my other favorite tools is around looking up. And again, never vilifying the habits. We all do this. But if you're doing something unconsciously, it can lead to habitual anxiety. How do you manage discomfort when trying to feel comfortable? Not quite sure how to balance those two. It is all about practicing when you are comfortable. We just can't build the muscle in our most challenging moments. It's not possible. That's why in my group program, which I'm launching, there's these live practice sessions where people similar to today can show up and get the tools and get some coaching in a supported space. Because in those most challenging spaces, we cannot access our new tools. So, what else? Any other thoughts on leaning back? I want to get to the next tool because it's the combination of these tools that really move the needle. We cannot slow down by telling ourselves to slow down. And why do you think you speak fast? Drop it in the chat. Why are you speaking fast? For a lot of my clients, it is fear of losing my train of thought. It's wanting to get through it as fast as possible because it's so uncomfortable to just get it over with. All of this perpetuates the problem. So, what we need to do instead is front load our thinking. Instead of thinking and speaking at the same time. And as an example of this, I was working with just this week, I was working with an engineer at a small tech company, and he's a tech lead. So he's like influencing without explicit authority. And I asked him to tell me about his current project. And instead of being high level, he started really in the details. He started with like, well, actually, it's two-pronged. And then these two prongs have five prongs, right? And he was really trying to organize it in a way that I could understand. But because he's an engineer and a technical leader, I'm a layperson. All of that went over my head, right? And so we talked about this fulcrum in leadership. And I see it in my clients when you go from an IC to a people manager, how important it is suddenly to be concise, suddenly to be, I will say this, and I mean it, singular in your clarity. When you're put on the spot, instead of speaking and thinking right at the same time, to create that pause from leaning back, to think, what's the one thing they need to know? And starting with that. And this does two things. First of all, it creates complete clarity at the top, which is what leadership communication needs. The first thing you say is the most important thing that they will remember. And it's also just not habitual. So it changes up your habitual communication, and that makes you present, just like leaning back. So this idea, I call it the golden nugget. When I'm put on the spot, again, I want to go into all my habits, and instead I lean back, I create this micro pause, and I ask myself, what's the most important thing that they need to know? And this micro pause will take maybe a second. It will feel like an eternity. And that's what happens with public speaking. You have to give yourself time to pause. I actually, executive presence is a term I do not like, but I secretly believe that it actually means pausing. I believe that executive presence is actually empathetic presence. It's what happens when we get into that relationality, when we make people feel safe and heard. 93% of our communication is nonverbal, especially when there's high stakes. So it's really, really important. So this is the golden nugget. You're put on the spot, and instead of going to the habit, what's the most important thing that they need to know? And instead of starting in the details, starting as big as you can go. And maybe right off the bat, you think, oh, it's two things. Is there an umbrella over those two that can really bring them together? The key here is actually taking the time to think on your feet, which most people are not doing because we're too lost in our habitual anxiety. I say the golden nugget, but my clients make this their own. They'll say, like, what's my point? Or what do I care the most about right now? What do they care the most about? It doesn't actually matter as long as it focuses you. I've given you two tools today, the lean back, which can get you out of your head and into your body, and the golden nugget, which can give your thinking a place to start. And I don't want you to try both of them at once. I actually want you to choose one. And choose one meeting later today, a meeting where you're normally comfortable, and try it. And you might remember 10% of the time that is success. Practice in low stakes first. And remember that we all naturally center ourselves when we're public speaking. Does anyone feel like that? Like once we're public speaking, it feels like I need to do a good job. And all of a sudden, the only thing I can focus on is myself. Yeah. So it's important to manually recenter the audience. And that is what this work does. As we talked about in the beginning, we're in a crisis right now, and it's a crisis of who gets heard. And unfortunately, a lot of dominant voices are filling up space in rooms right now. And we need to hear from more empathetic and thoughtful leaders. And so I mentioned before, I'm launching my first group program in 2 years, and enrollment is opening today. I am so excited. And I have spent the last year building this, and it is how you can build your own playbook to access your confidence consistently. It's an 8 week group program. And in those 8 weeks, you can come to unlimited presence labs with tools that you will use and that will be personalized for you. And these presence labs happen 3 times a month and they rotate between the 3 themes of this framework. So we'll have our embody labs where we're breathing and we're practicing grounding tools, our expert labs where you're going to be answering thought leadership questions and getting personalized coaching as you practice, and the embody labs where you can show up with Q&As and ask questions and get feedback in a supported confidential space. And you also get lifetime access to course videos, which are super short and concise and clear, and the most, I think, consolidated version of this work I've ever done. This is, I think, the fourth group program I've launched. I do want you to share this work with people that you know. And maybe you know someone on your team or someone that you love who is quiet and who needs to speak up, someone who wants to advocate in their communities or in their workplace. And so I ask that you do share this work with them, share this website with them. This work is really important. And I want you to keep in touch. If group coaching isn't right for you, maybe private coaching is. My private practice is currently full, but I do have a wait list. I'm booking about a month or two out right now. So go on the website and explore. And if you're not ready for any of that right now, that's great too. I want us to stay in touch. I want just for you to know that this is not your fault and for you to stop blaming yourself and to have tools to do that. And so, as we close, think of someone that you love who needs to be heard more and share this work with them. And I also want you to remember that you communicate with confidence when you're comfortable, and the answers are in your comfort. The answer to my anxiety is always in the present moment, and the next present moment, and the next one. I'm going to stay on for a bit and answer any of your questions. I'm so grateful that you took time out of your very busy days to come and do this work and to be together. And thank you all so much. Thank you. What questions can I answer?